Today we're going to talk about the Tier VIII Pan-European destroyer Katsonis, which is the successor to Split on the tech tree line for the gunboat Pan-European destroyers. I'm going to go over the stats as I usually do, but keep in mind we've got Swirsky as commander. He's got Rumble and Sims as inspirations. Sims for a little bit of extra HP, Rumble for a little bit of extra range on the main battery guns. So the numbers I read you are going to be influenced by that. But before we get into any of those, I want to talk about the HE pen on the Katsonis and the Split. I tested it out last night just to make sure I was right. I took both the Split and Katsonis into private training rooms and lined up a couple stationary bots in Colbert and Henri. Mostly because Henri has 30mm belt armor and Colbert, of course, has 32mm armor everywhere. I found that both the Split and Katsonis were able to pen Colbert's 32mm bow with their high explosive. And so the high explosive on these destroyers pens more than 32mm of armor. I don't know exactly what the number is. I keep seeing people say it's 35, so I'm just going to assume that's right. 35 is not a common armor value in this game, though. Of course, 32 is. That's like the minimum armor plating on most high-tier battleships on the bow and the stern. And, of course, a lot of cruisers have much less than 32mm plating, so Katsonis can pen all of that with its high explosive, and that's kind of nice, given that this line does not have AP on its guns. Now, with Sims at the helm, we've got 23,340 HP, definitely enough to get into some contests with some enemy destroyers, which we're going to be doing here shortly. The enemy DD, which is a Lucian, was minimap spotted by our CV, and we can see he's headed in toward the capture circle, but he's got a lot of ships around him, so we're cautiously reversing toward the cap. We don't want to rush straight into that guy, because as soon as we get spotted, he's got a number of teammates next to him that can shoot at us and really do a number to our HP. So we want to be cautious in our approach, and it's going to take a little while to actually get there. But once we do, we have 6 140mm guns. The turret setup is a little bit unusual, though. It's got single turrets, and there's 2 of them right on the front of the ship on that platform that would usually house 1 super firing turret. We've got 2 guns on there, so you cannot always get all 6 of these guns on target. Most of the time, it's 5. But they've got a range of 12.3 kilometers with the Rumble-inspired Swirsky build, 3.2 second reload with the reload mod, 15.1 second turret traverse, maximum HE shell damage is 2,000, fire chance is 10%. Both of those numbers are fantastic. And the Lucian is in the cap now, so we're going to deploy the main gimmick of this ship, which is going to be influenced by one of Swirsky's new commander skills called Fox Flare in the 4th row. It's got a little picture of a fox on it, so you can't miss it. It buffs the radar massively. Watch what it does here as we get spotted by the Lucian. We're going to deploy the smoke screen. We get 2 of those, and it's got a 20-second deploy time. You see that there? We deploy the radar as the timer on the smoke screen reaches 18 seconds, and the radar is 18 seconds. This Fox Flare skill on Swirsky is a little bit, you could maybe say, overpowered. What it does is it decreases the main battery reload time while the radar is active, which helps in taking out the Lucian, but more crucially, it makes the radar duration match the smoke generator action time if the latter is longer. So theoretically, if you can deploy the smoke and the radar at exactly the same time, then you get a 20-second radar. But that only works while the smoke screen is being deployed. If I were to deploy the radar right now, or without the smoke screen literally coming out of my ship, then we'd only get a 10-second radar, which is the base radar time on this consumable. So very powerful, and obviously Lucian is no slouch. It's got a very potent gimmick all its own with its powerful sonar and smoke combo. This has a radar and smoke combo, and up to 20 seconds on the radar, which is probably enough time to at least seriously cripple any destroyer you might encounter. The torpedoes on this thing, though, I also find a little bit annoying, sort of like the turret setup. It's almost like this thing is an obsolete, outdated kind of destroyer hull and design with the way that the guns are set up, but also the way that the torpedoes are set up. We've got 8 torpedoes in total, set in 2 quadruple launchers, but there's only one quadruple launcher on either side of the ship, so you can only launch 4 torpedoes at any given time. They do, however, have a very quick reload time at 75 seconds. They don't hit particularly hard. 10,700 is the maximum damage. And of course, you have to keep in mind that when the torpedoes do hit, they might be hitting torpedo protection, which is going to reduce their damage to anywhere in the 5, 6, 7K range. So they don't hit very hard at all, but they do seem to have a good flooding chance. They're also incredibly fast, 80 knots, and 9-kilometer range. And of course, you can benefit from the unique pan-European sort of super narrow spread. Not if the Schroeder's going to turn out of the way and miss the torpedoes, but I think we're going to be tagging him here soon. We can see aircraft also flying around in the distance, so I guess it's a good time to talk about the AA stats, or lack thereof. The aggregate rating on this AA is 33, for whatever that's worth. Sometimes I don't think these aggregate ratings on the specs page really mean anything, but I can tell you that this AA doesn't seem all that great to me. I think you can replace the engine boost consumable with the defensive AA mod if you want to, but at that point it seems like you would be buffing a turd, so I don't know why you would. I had a match that I didn't record. Did pretty well in it. I, at one point, had a 100% win rate in this ship until it went down to 80% a little while ago. But I was facing off against a Lexington, or rather, he was harassing me for the entire game. He was coming after me with his dive bombers and torpedo bombers, literally for all 15 minutes of the match. And, well, this thing shot down 13 of his planes in that time, and I think a couple of them were from the fighter squadrons, which are not, like, legit plane kills, you know? They don't mean a whole lot. So that's all to say I don't think this thing can defend itself from planes like, for example, the Friesland would be able to do. However, moving on from that low light of the AA defenses, we come to a bit of a highlight. This thing has pretty good maneuverability characteristics. It's got a top speed of 42 knots, which is really good, especially considering the hull. You wouldn't think it would be this fast, but it is. And then you can get it going over 42 knots with the engine boost. The turning circle is a little bit questionable. It's 720 meters. And personally, I think this thing feels like it takes an awfully long time to completely turn around and needs a really wide area to do it. You can maybe kind of see it here, but we aren't really in a full turn. It just seems to me like it's got a big turning circle, and to be fair, 720 millimeters, or 720 meters rather, is fairly large. But it does have a 4-second rudder shift time, so that's pretty good. And the concealment, using just, I think, the concealment module and, of course, Swirsky at the helm is 5.5. It's not the stealthiest DD you're ever going to see, and if you wanted to substitute one of my inspirations for Eric Bai or something, then you could probably get this down a little bit closer to 5 km. I don't really think you need to, though, not with the smoke radar combo that you've got on this thing. So I think it's an effective destroyer hunter. It's certainly an effective gunboat. The smoke screens that it's got, it only gets 2 charges of them at base, but they do have a fairly long duration. They have a dispersion time of 93 seconds, so that's over a minute, 30 seconds. And, you know, that's enough time to sit in one place and farm some stuff. It's not quite as good as, like, the Friesland smoke screen, for example, or the American smoke screens generally. I think the Velos has one of those, and its duration time is something like 127 seconds, so a little over 2 minutes. Not quite as good on the Katsonis, but certainly good enough to park and farm. And I think the ballistics on these guns are fairly good too, so they're not too difficult to aim at longer ranges. The only bad part about the guns, if there are any, are number 1, the turret setup is obsolete and inefficient, so you can't really get all 6 on target. And number 2, it does seem like the dispersion and accuracy is a little bit questionable on them. But take a look at these torpedoes. Even though you can only launch 4 off either side, there are scenarios where you can get all 4 of them off at even separate targets. We've got a flood going on the Brandenburg, because these things do seem to have a good flooding chance. And that Schroeder there, well, he's not paying as much attention as maybe he should be, because we're going to take him out with 3 torpedoes. You see, it takes all 3 of them to actually sink him, though, because he didn't have a lot of HP. And, well, of course, these torpedoes are not very strong. They don't hit very hard. The Pobeda gets us there with his skip bombers, which is a little bit annoying, but we're able to finish off the Brandenburg. And that just leaves one enemy battleship who's up in the corner of the map being chased by, I think, a cruiser. He's going to end up going down. And then, of course, we've got Pobeda to contend with. And I think I said earlier that, of course, this HE pens more than 32 millimeters of armor. Another example for you to see that in action will be against the Pobeda. He's got 30 millimeter deck armor, and from this kind of distance and range, I think most destroyers would shatter a bunch of their shells because it would be hitting the deck armor, provided, of course, you take the proper lead and don't miss like I did there with the initial salvo. But if you can dial in the aim and you get these guns on target with the Katsonis, they're coming in almost vertically with, you know, a little bit of arcs there, and coming down on the Pobeda's 30 millimeter deck. You can see that, for the most part, we're getting penetrations. We're getting one shatter here and there, but I think that is either on the conning tower armor of the Pobeda, which is thicker than 30 millimeters, or it could be on the belt. Some of these shells might be falling a little bit short and hitting the belt armor instead of the deck. But for the most part, full pens doing full damage. And, of course, there's always the fire chance. It's nice, too, when the Pobeda is desperately trying to kill you, and he can't get his skip bombers on your broadside. They are kind of dodgeable if you can approach them from the front like this, and one of those skip bombers would be enough to take us out. But we're going to get revenge on this Pobeda for hitting us with the skip bombers earlier, I think, unless, no, one of our teammates steals it and then just gives us the fisting medal. Or ribbon, rather, which is not ideal. I would have liked the sinking ribbon, but I'll take the fist, I suppose. 100,000 damage done, 2,800 XP. A little bit of an average game, I'd say, in the Katsonis, but I think it shows off what the ship can do pretty well. And I'd say this is a fantastic ship. It's certainly worth grinding to. The split at Tier 7 is also excellent. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.